You are looking at Dave Nelson. I am a home chef and food service professional for over 40 years. And I am in my house tonight all alone with my cat yet again. And I'm going to be going over some kitchen wisdom for you guys. Okay. First thing out of the gate, if you have not seen this before, you might have trouble finding it. We are at Indy Cooks on YouTube, on Facebook. This is a food group and you can join it if you are not already a member. But otherwise, if you just kind of fell across this on the internet, please enjoy. I do this about once a week and I go over kitchen wisdom, basically, just some of the stuff that I've kind of gleaned over the last 4 decades in kitchens, as I said. Also, occasionally I will bring on special guests that you can kind of learn from as well. So lots of chefs, lots of farmers and butchers and other people that are in the food world. And so that's always a good time. Let's see. So what are we doing tonight? I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Oh, got a little itch. Every time I start this, my nose starts itching. Okay, so it's a thing. But the impetus of this show was partly what I did last week. Last week, I did a show called Breaking Bird, where I broke down a chicken. And from that chicken, I generated a bunch of bones. And so that kind of led me to the idea of doing a stock making class in the next episode. And so I was doing that. And then another thing that kind of pushed me towards doing this show was I was talking to someone at work and I told them what I was thinking of doing. And I'm talking about stocks and broths and things like that. And this person actually said to me, oh, I didn't realize there was a difference, right? And so I kind of want to talk about all of that. I want to talk about how to make a stock, just kind of the basic rules of the road when you are starting cooking. Okay, this is kind of one of the first things we always teach in culinary school, and it's a good reason for that. It's because stocks are the foundation for all of cuisine. That's kind of how they are known. In fact, the French word fond, F-O-N-D, kind of means foundation, and that is the term we use when we are talking about stocks. Fond, okay? The fonds of cuisine are the stocks of cuisine. So we're going to be kind of going through, as I said, the stock making mise en place, basically, start to finish, soup to nuts, as you will. Okay, so we're going to go through that. As I'm doing that, I'm going to kind of get it on the fire. I want it to start coming up to temperature, and then as that starts happening, I am going to kind of talk a little bit about the difference between stocks and broths. I want to talk about vegetable stocks and brown stocks as well. Tonight, we're going to be focusing mostly on a white stock. It's a very, very simple preparation. And so that's what we'll be looking at first. And then we're going to kind of go into taking care of a stock that I already have going. Here, let me just kind of show you real quick. I have a pot going on the fire, and this is just some bones and little bits and bobs that I had around the kitchen, and I started a stock with that today, and it's been going for long enough. And so I want to show you not just how to make a stock, but how to drop a stock. That's kind of the term that we use for that. We strain the stock out, and then we'll talk about cooling it off and all of that good stuff and getting it ready for anything else we want to do. This is going to lead me into another class. Basically, there's a progression here. And the other class will be how to clarify it. So consommé will be another kind of lesson that I throw out there for you guys. And that's kind of what we're looking at tonight. So let's kind of get into it. The first thing I want to do is go over the basic ingredients of a white stock. Okay, so welcome to my kitchen. I'm going to go ahead and kind of take a look at my board and get this a little closer here. And we're going to look at some of the ingredients that we're going to use. First of all, there are some bones here, okay? We are going to use some vegetables. And this mixture of vegetables that you see, we see this a lot in European, especially French cuisine. This combination, onion, celery, carrot, this is what we call mirepoix, okay? And so we're going to be working with that first. I'm going to leave that close. And then finally, another ingredient to the stocks, there's 4 parts here. Another ingredient is what we call aromatics, okay? And so the aromatics are things like bay leaf, peppercorn. I've got my peppercorns in my pepper mill here. I've got garlic. I've got some thyme, fresh thyme here. And oftentimes you'll see many European cooks throw in cloves in their stock. I'm not real big on cloves in my stock. It kind of tastes like pumpkin pie, right? And so I kind of leave those out. But those are my basic what we consider aromatics. Get them off over there. You can see them: garlic, bay leaf, black peppercorn, and some beautiful, beautiful thyme leaves. Okay. Now you can use dried thyme. I don't want to show you the label, but there it is. Okay, just some regular old dried thyme is a good ingredient. And one ingredient that we're not using, here's my salt shaker or my salt cellar, I believe you call that. And we are not using salt in stocks. And there's a reason for that. And probably the main reason is because we're using this as a springboard for other preparations, right? And so if I salt this item here, this stock that we're putting together, later on when I add it to something else, it might become too salty. Let's say I throw a bunch of ham in this preparation. I'm using this stock. If the stock's already salted, going with the ham, everything's going to just be a big old mouthful of salt when you eat it, right? Another thing about stocks is sometimes we reduce them. You probably heard this term watching food TV and all of that stuff. And that term reducing or reduction means that we're going to simmer a broth or a liquid of some kind, and it's going to evaporate. And as it evaporates, it concentrates flavor. It concentrates other things as well, but it concentrates flavor. And one of those flavors might be salt. So if you already have salt in the mix, when you reduce that stock, that salt is going to get saltier and saltier, and it's just going to concentrate more and more in what you're making. And so we leave the salt out of the mix. Okay, and so that's kind of the basic idea. All right, so I'm going to put my aromatics aside for now. Okay, I don't need that stuff right now. And thank you. Looks like sound is good. Thank you, Andrea. So I think what I want to do is really get these things on the fire. We'll get this done pretty quickly, I think, today. And once things are on the fire, then we'll talk about hierarchy of stocks and broths and all of that stuff. It's not complex stuff. None of this stuff is rocket science. It's really easy. I'm going to go ahead and take a little sip, and we'll get into this. Delicious. Okay, so the next subject is going to be mirepoix. Okay, we're going to get into mirepoix. That's the vegetable portion of our stock making. And this, again, I'll show it to you. It is onion, it is carrot, it is celery. You see them all right there. This is a base flavoring for many, many European, especially French preparations that you're going to see out there. Okay, now as I cut these vegetables up, something I used to teach my culinary students out there. I taught for about 15 years out there in for-profit schools like Cordon Bleu. I mentioned the name, right? I taught at community colleges, and they were all career-based programs, right? We're teaching professional cooking here. And so when we talk about the vegetables, we are talking, I want to kind of discuss like the size that we're cutting this stuff, right? And so if I have a stock that's going for a long period of time, let me get that on there. Where's the director? If I have a stock going for a long period of time, that stock is going to need vegetables that are cut larger. If it's going for a short period of time, I'm going to make the cuts really, really small. For the stock that we're making today, we're making a white stock. It's going to be made out of chicken bones. Chicken bones extract fairly quickly, but not like a veg stock. But the chicken stock usually goes about 2 to 4 hours. And that means my pieces are usually about a ½ inch to an inch in size. And so I've got some of these baby carrots that I had around. I decided to just use those guys up for this little session here, and I'm just going to leave them alone. That's a decent size. In 2 hours, we're going to extract all the flavor we need out of these guys. And also, if I cut them any smaller, by the time we cook them 2 hours, these guys are almost going to liquefy in there and just kind of turn my stock really, really cloudy. So you want pretty chunky stuff if you're going to be making a stock for about 2 hours or 4 hours, right? When we're talking about brown stocks, that's going to be another session that we get into. Those brown stocks, they go for about 6 to 8 hours, and you want like at least an inch in size when you're cutting that vegetable that's going in there. Again, the vegetable combination called mirepoix, okay? So let me go ahead and get into this. I'm not really going to touch these baby carrots here, right? They're fine. That's a good size. I got a piece of celery already on there, and I'm going to set that plate aside, and I'm going to go ahead and start using my knife. And I've got tons and tons of videos on knife work on YouTube at the Indy Cooks channel. Okay, you can kind of look that stuff up. Just some of the basics here. My grip, I tend to kind of lay my knife on my finger, on my index finger, and then I put my thumb on the other side of that, and then I just wrap the rest of my fingers around the handle. That's just really short and sweet as far as the grip goes. With my left hand, I want to curl my fingertips underneath. You guys see that? They're curled underneath, and the knife is going to ride right on that front phalange on my finger right there. As long as I don't lift my knife up, I'm not going to cut into my fingers. The knife blade is just going to ride right on those finger knuckles, if you will, right? And so I'm going to just go ahead. One of the things I always told my students is I don't need this to be pretty. I need it fast, right? So I'm just going to go right through this straight across, about 1/2-inch pieces. And that'll be a good size of mirepoix for a 2 to 4 hour stock. And I cut that in half. Whoop, drop the piece. Let me get that out of here. I don't want to be stepping on things all night. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that down. I've got about the same amount of celery as I do carrot. You guys see that? Almost exactly the same amount. I'm going to say it's exactly the same. Now, when we're making mirepoix, there's a standard ratio here. It's a 1/3 carrot. It's a quarter carrot, a quarter celery, and then 1/2 onion, okay? And so that's what we're going to see. When I'm cutting the onion, I'm going to cut the top of that onion off first. There's the root end, that's the bottom. I'm going to cut off the root end. And then I'm going to stand it up on those cut ends and cut it in half. And that's the first 3 steps of cleaning an onion out there in a professional kitchen. I'm going to peel off that exterior. And, you know, there's a little funky piece on that onion, but I'm going to go ahead and throw that in my stock pot. The rest of this onion I'm going to save. These root ends I can save. I can throw those in a stock. In fact, I think I'll throw those in the stock that I'm making right now, face down. I just put them in my pot over there. No, you can't see that. That's all right. Trust me. I'm going to get rid of all of the onion peel that I generated. I don't want any of that onion peel going into my food, and that's a good general rule when you're cooking. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to just do 1 cut across the face of this. The root end is towards you, and I'm just going to go across the top. The root end is holding this onion together, and then I'm just going to cut these guys into 1/2-inch chunks. And I think I'll take the rest of that root end and cut it on up. And I'm going to lay it on that plate, and you'll see that I have 1/4 carrot. I have 1 carrot quarter celery, and then I've got about half of that plate is covered in onion there. That's a great ratio for my mirepoix. We don't do tons and tons of recipes out in the industry. We can't have professional cooks just standing there reading off a piece of paper and, you know, reading 1 step and then making that step on their board and going to the next step. We want to teach them to be intuitive. We want to teach them things like ratios so they can just visualize, hey, that's 1/2, 1/4, and they can go to town on it, right? So that's great stuff. I want to talk about another ratio when we're doing stock making, okay? So let's take another look at our ingredients. Remember, we said it was bones, it's vegetables, mirepoix specifically, it's aromatics, and it's also water. That's part 4 in this. Looks like James has shown up. Good to see you, sir. So with my mirepoix, generally speaking, to make 1 gallon of stock, you want about 1 pound of mirepoix. That's probably less than 1 pound. You want about 5 pounds of bones, and I definitely only have about 2.5 pounds of that. So I got about 1/2 pound of mirepoix, really. That's probably about good. I've got about 2.5 pounds of bones here. Okay, those are chicken bones. And what I did is I rinsed them all off. And those are left from our class last week. And then finally, we're making 1 gallon of stock, so we need 1 gallon of water. So that ratio for stocks, again, for white stocks or for brown stocks, it's 5 pounds of bones, 1 pound of mirepoix, 1 gallon of water. Does it have to be exact? Do you see me measuring anything? No, you don't, right? This is a ballpark, right? And so we kind of use these basic ratios and ballpark measurements to do cooking. When you get into pastry, much more exact. But if you're in the kitchen, it's a bunch of pirates, right? And we're just like a little of this, a little of that, just tossing things in there right and left. And that's kind of how it works, right? And so I'm going to go ahead. I've got my 2.5 pounds of bones there, okay? Let's tilt that camera and you can kind of see them a little better. Not that you want to see them, it's just chicken bones, not too thrilling there. And I'm going to go ahead and throw in about 1/2 pound of mirepoix. half onion, quarter and a quarter of celery and carrot. Okay, this stock's almost on the fire here, folks, okay? Next thing I'm gonna throw in there are some aromatics, okay? And this is where we get a little bit of character, and in early culinary school, we're always talking about the same aromatics, okay? It's usually thyme, fresh or dry. I showed you some dry earlier. Bay leaves and peppercorn. Those are really the big three. So I'm just gonna pull out some peppercorns, throw them on the plate so you can see them. Yes, those are peppercorns. Boop. And then I think I like a little garlic in my stock, and I don't really need to peel this or anything. All I'm going to do is smash these cloves. And so I've got my board, I've got my garlic on the table, and I'm just going to use the side of my knife. I put the tip down, and then let me scoot over, put the tip down on the board, and now I have a lever, and I just push down and I crack those guys, smash them a little bit just to help extract a little more flavor. And I'm putting it on the plate with the rest of the aromatics. Boom, crack. I just crack those guys. I'm not worried about the paper, or what I call the peel on garlic. I always call it paper. I'm not worried about that. This is all going to be strained out later, okay? So in it goes. Hey, looks like we got Chef Jim out there, Jim Turconet. Longest working chef back in my hometown. Good to see you, sir. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to do a little wipe down here. And we're going to put the final ingredient in our stock. We're taking it slow this time. I used to do these quarantine kitchen happy hours, and I would just load in 5 or 8 techniques into one class. Now I'm just playing with one technique at a time. It's all about stock. So the only other ingredient is going to be water. I mentioned a gallon of water earlier. You would think I'd need about a gallon of water for this half batch here. But really what we want to do is cover the ingredients, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and get that started. And while that's filling up, a word about water. We never use water out of the hot water tap. We always use the cold water. Think about that nasty water in the hot water tank at your house, right? All kinds of minerals, maybe a little rusty in there. That water's nasty, okay? We want that nice, fresh, cold water out of your taps, as long as you've got a safe water program in your city, unlike some American cities these days. But looks like I got enough water there. Whoop, didn't turn off. And so point is, cold water out of the cold water tap. Now, I will also say that, let me get this on here and turn on the fire. And I'm going to turn this fire on to 11. It's cranked all the way. Why wait around, right? I want to bring this up to a boil, and then we're going to reduce it to a simmer. But let's see, another word about water. When I am trying to impart flavor into something, I tend to start with warm water. An example of this would be poaching. When I'm doing poached fish, I make a flavorful liquid. I make kind of a broth, basically a short broth or a court bouillon, okay? And I start my salmon or chicken or whatever it is that I'm poaching in the hot water. But if I'm trying to extract flavor, I'm using cold water. I'm starting cold, and as that water comes up, flavors are coming out, right? So hot liquids for imparting flavors, incorporating flavors, and cold liquids for extracting flavors, okay? So there it is. I've got my pot on the fire. You can kind of see it there, I think. I'm going to kind of poke things around, and I will say, use this. I will say that in the early stages of stock making, I don't have to worry about stirring this so much. But once this comes to a boil, we're not going to stir it anymore. We set the spoon aside and step away from the spoon, okay? So as long as this hasn't hit a boil yet, I can go ahead and get in here and stir it. I should say some chefs make their stocks by never hitting a boil. They only go up to the simmer point. I usually go to a boil and then turn down to a simmer. So there it is. I've got my mirepoix in there. I've got my bones in there. I've got some aromatics in there, which include some thyme and bay leaf, black pepper, and a couple of garlic cloves. And that is the basic white stock ratio right there, okay? And so those are going to be coming up. As that comes up, I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. What we don't want to do is have this stock boiling and boiling and boiling. When we do that, we're going to get a really, really cloudy stock, okay? I want a crystal clear, beautiful looking stock. And so I am going to just hit the boil, and then it's going to come down to a simmer, and I'm just going to let it sit there and go low and low. Good to see you, Chef Bert. Good to see you. I got some cook people out there. That's good stuff. As this goes low and slow, I'm going to get in there. I had my spoon. Where did I put it? I'm going to have my spoon, and I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to skim any scum or funk or whatever you want to call it to the surface. I will say the culinary term is scum. Okay. So you want to scoop off the scum. We've got a couple of tools for that. One is a spoon. One is a ladle. Okay. And then the other is what we call a skimmer. Okay. It's like a flat paddle with a bunch of holes in it. And we can go in there and remove scum from the surface of a stock that's going. And that's kind of a nice tool for that. A skimmer is not to be confused with a spider, right? You see that? That's called a spider because it looks like a spider web. Skimmer is a different tool. You guys see that? Okay. So that is for pulling scum and funk off the surface of stocks and other liquids in the kitchen. Okay. That is for pulling stuff out of liquid, right? Like boiling eggs or something like that. I can pull them out with a spider. Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. So the stock is on the fire. We're waiting for it to come up to temperature. I want to go over some ladle dynamics in a little bit here because I'm going to use my ladle to kind of demonstrate how to skim scum with a ladle. Okay. A lot of people don't really hold a ladle properly. And so I want to get in there and kind of show you that ladle work. Okay. I'm going to, like I said, once I'm kind of done talking, I'm going to pull this other stock off and show you how to strain a stock. There's a couple of little tips there, nothing complicated. None of this is rocket science. But before I get into any of that stuff, I want to talk about the difference between stocks and broths. Okay. This is a distinction. And you will hear a few years back, you would hear, the hippie types, I was working in a butcher shop and we sold bones, right? Because we're a butcher shop. And we had a yoga studio across the street. And the guys from the yoga studio would come over and they would be talking about, they're all on keto. So they want really, really fatty pork chops and things. It's like, leave the fat on, man. I want all that fat. It helps me burn fat, all of that, right? And they would also want bones so they could make bone broth, man, that kind of thing. And to us in the butcher shop, we were all just thinking there's no such thing as bone broth. There's stocks, which are made out of bones, and there's broths. Okay, so let's go over the hierarchy here. When you take bones and aromatics and water and you bring them up to a boil and then you simmer them for an extended period of time, you're extracting flavor, you're extracting nutrients and other things like gelatin, which give your stock body and a little bit of thickness, and it kind of rolls across your palate and kind of sticks, it gloms on, and that's what delivers flavor. That gelatin is like a flavor delivery system, if you will. Now, that's a stock, and that's what you're seeing today. A broth is what we're going to do in our next class. Next time I do a kitchen demo, okay, if I don't have an interview, okay, I'm going to do a demo on consomme, okay? And what consomme is a clarified stock. We'll take a stock, a delicious stock that we make, okay? But stocks are a little thin, not much flavor to them. And we're going to fortify that stock. And this is where the broth idea comes from. A broth is a fortified stock. So I take a stock, thin, watery, like I said. And then let's say I put that stock on the fire with some extra vegetables and maybe put some meat in there. I was talking about poaching chicken and salmon and things like that earlier. If I'm poaching chicken off in a liquid, that is going to fortify that liquid with chickeny goodness, if you will, right? That is now a broth. If I just throw meat and vegetables into a stock, it's going to fortify the flavor. And that is what a broth is. A broth is a fortified stock. If you're just making what we're making tonight, we're very much talking about a stock, at least in the world of culinary. I don't know what a bone broth is, man. Okay. It's all about, it's either a stock or a broth. A broth is a fortified stock. Now, I mentioned consomme. I'm going to add a few things to the process. And what I'm going to get is a fortified stock that is also clarified, crystal clear and beautiful. Okay, that's what a consomme is. And so that'll be another conversation for another day, but typically the hierarchy goes stock first, you fortify it, you get a broth, you fortify and clarify it, and that is when you get a consomme. And this is like fine dining stuff. You see the clarity of a consomme. You could like drop a dime in a consomme and still read the date on the dime, right? That is what I'm talking about for consomme. Very, very flavorful because it's been fortified, and it's just a beautiful thing. Okay, so that'll be part 3, right? So that's kind of the hierarchy of stocks, broths. Again, bone broth, I don't know what it is. Okay, you can kind of think about that on your own, but it's a thing, and it was a thing that was going there for a while. It was a statement that you heard quite a lot about. You'd see books written on bone broths and things like that, and I'll guarantee like chefs are looking at that and just rolling their eyes, right? Stocks are what we know, broths are what we know, but we don't know what a bone broth is. Okay, so that's my 2 cents on that. Okay, I am still waiting for this to come up to temperature, so let me just do another little switcheroo on my stove. I wanted to talk a little bit about ladle work, okay, and how to use a ladle properly. So we're going to get a little closer to the fire here. Don't catch on fire, don't melt nothing, okay? And you'll see my stock that's been going. Now, if I get really close, I don't want to hurt anything, but if I get really close, I don't know if you can see how clear that is, but when you look down, I got to turn this off. When you look down there where it's bubbling, little bloop bloop, look how clear that is. That looks like consomme already to me, okay? It's really, really crystal clear. And that is just a testament to the skill of the chef that is making it. Thanks, chef. You're welcome, chef, okay? Also, I've been kind of skimming this, so there is very little funk or foam on the top of this thing. I've been kind of getting rid of that. But there is some fat floating on the top of this. I'll give you a little tip here, or a little hint. This is kind of a kitchen sink stock that I threw together out of parts and bits and bobs that I've been collecting in my kitchen, throwing in a freezer bag. This has chicken bones in it, like roast chicken bones. This has a few pork rib bones in it. This has some scraps from some Wagyu that I was playing with. And because it has that Wagyu in there, it's got some fat on the surface. So what I'm going to do is kind of demo skimming fat off the surface of a stock, because we don't just skim scum, we skim fat as well. So let's talk about this tool here that we call a ladle. First of all, this has been cut off. Let me see if I got another one here. Here's a real ladle. Okay, so this ladle has a little hook for hooking, okay? And it's the same size. When you look at a ladle, most of them have, you know, commercial ladles have a measurement on them. That's a 2 ounce, or there you can see it. And I use these for measuring cups around the kitchen. I don't keep a set of measuring cups around because I always have ladles in the kitchen, right? So I need a 1/4 cup measure. That's a 2 ounce. And I'll just grab a ladle and measure out 2 ounces, and then I'm good to go, right? So we always have these measuring cups that we call ladles around. You'll notice when I grab this thing that I grab the balance point. I'm not holding it down by the hook. I used to get students all the time that would grab it for the first time and pick it up like so, you know, it just doesn't feel right in your hand. But I'll tell you what, you grab it right about there, that feels good, okay? That's the balance point right there. So that is how you hold a ladle. It's down there, it's not up here, okay? All out of whack like that, right about there, okay? Now, when we're using a ladle, what I want to do is go straight down in the liquid. So there's the surface of the liquid, and I will lower my ladle down to the liquid itself. So the liquid is right at the lip, and then any fat is just going to scoot over that lip and go in there. What I don't want to do when I'm doing this is scoop up a bunch of that beautiful broth underneath, right? And so I'm going to go straight down flat on the surface of that liquid. I don't want to tilt. That's going to lose, I'm going to lose broth that way. So I go straight down, let the fat just roll over the edge. And I do the same thing when I'm doing the scum on the surface of a pot. And my other pot is starting to come up. So we'll see some real scum here showing up in just a second. So I'm excited about that. By the way, you don't have to have a ladle. I've been using a spoon all this time to kind of take care of this business too. But I wanted to show you ladle dynamics, okay? What I want to do is I go down and I just place the butt of the ladle in there, and I just kind of give it a little, barely stir it. I don't want to knock a bunch of particles into my stock. And then what I do is I just edge it down and I'm just getting the fat. It's just seeping right over the edge. You guys see that? If I tilt this, I'm going to be losing broth. And there's a lot of fat in here because, again, I had some Wagyu beef scrap in here. All right. Again, if anybody has any questions, please shout them out. It's really hard to tell the difference between the fat and the broth in this because it's such a clear stock. Oh, well, thank you, chef. Oh, you're welcome, chef. Now, I've done a little bit of fat, but this other pot is coming up to temperature. Let's switch to that because we can really see foam and scum and things like that. You'll be able to see it a little better. And now you can see that there is some definite foamy scum on the surface of this. And so now we're getting in there and taking that off. So again, I go down there just with the butt of the ladle and I just let that foam slide on in. Notice how I'm going around the edge of the outside of the pot, not really stirring things, being very gentle. And it's really hitting that boil. Perfect timing. And the kitchen is smelling great, by the way. So I'm picking up all of that scum. Now, if I leave that scum in there, what's going to happen as it simmers is that scum just starts coming apart. Right now, it's kind of coagulated up top, but that scum starts coming apart and working its way back into the stock, clouding it, adding particulate matter to the stock. So there it is. You guys see I'm kind of tilting that ladle to get it all done. Another little trick I have is I'll turn up the heat and I'll move that stock over to one side. It simmers on one side and it pushes the funk over to the other side. Being very gentle. I'm kind of just brushing it over there. And now I've got all the funk over to this side. The bubbling is pushing it over there, right? That's another little trick we'll use. And I'm going to go around and just pick up some more of that funk, some of that fat. And if I do this enough, this is going to be just a perfectly clear, beautiful stock. Boop. And there it is. Now, I don't want to boil it much more than I've done already. I've got a bunch of funk and fat and stuff like that in this bowl, but I haven't lost a lot of broth. So what I'm going to do now is turn this off, and I'm going to kick this to a back burner to go low and slow. We're going to simmer that. And when I say simmer, what we're talking about, bloop, 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 bloop. That's all we're talking about, okay? Simmering is very low and slow. So I'm going to kick it to the back, get back to my main burner here, and we're going to start dropping a stock. That's the next thing I want to talk about. If you can see this, let me show you. It literally is just like bloop, 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 bloop. That's perfect. Perfect. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to talk about dropping a stock. And what I mean by that is straining it, basically. So let me show you some mise en place that we see in commercial kitchens for that. If you're at home, you can use a strainer. You can use like a, I like to use two strainers. I like a rough strainer or a big hole strainer and a little hole strainer. So whatever setup you have for that. I'll show you what I got though. Two tools in the culinary world, okay? These conical caps here, okay? This one with the large holes, this is what we call a china cap, okay? Large holes, and that's good for straining out bones. It's solid. You can't really poke a hole in this thing. This other one is what we call a chinois, French for Chinese, okay? And that is a fine strainer. And so what I like to do, because these two fit together, and you know, you're probably not going to have this set up at home, but I can pour the heavy bones into this heavy china cap, and then the liquid is just going to flow through the mesh at the same time in the chinois, and that's going to strain it in one step, okay? If I'm at home and I don't have these kinds of tools, what I'll do is just use a strainer to get the big stuff out, and it's still a pretty chunky stock. And then I'll just use one of those little meshy strainers that you see in like bake shops and things like that, okay? And so that's what I'm going to use. As far as like straining this into something, the thing I am going to strain into is going to just be a kitchen pot. So let me do a little scene change here. So here I have a nice little pot that I'm going to strain into. I am going to have a coarse strainer and a fine strainer, and I'm going to put those two together to just make this a little bit faster. And then I'm going to actually just move my stock off of the stove. Here's a trick I do. Here, let me show you what I'm doing here. I only have one towel, right? I'm going to set my pot on the other towel here. So I'll throw a tool or anything else into that handle so I don't burn myself, and I can lift pots like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is get these things as close together as possible. And then I'm going to get something a little larger than the ladle I had. And I'm going to be very gentle with this. Remember, we don't want to stir this around. That's going to make our stock look cloudy and chunky. So I'm just going to get in there. I'm putting the butt of my cup in there, and I'm just getting broth out as I go. Did I say broth? I meant stock. You guys can see that. And then I just put it on through. If you're really worried about cloudiness, you would pour this a little bit slower than I just did. Like so, okay? Another little trick is to pour it when we're using these chinois. Let me see if I can show you this. We pour it at the top, and as it rolls down, it's collecting particles. You guys see that? It's like those old gold sluices and things that would catch gold particles. And so now I'm getting down into the chunkier stuff, and that is how I keep the chunks out of my stock. We're doing this really slowly and gently. Slow and gentle, my pretties. Okay, if you look in there, can you guys see in there? That is really clear. I was really hoping to get cloudy stock, because when I make a consomme, I'll tell you, in culinary school, I was always looking for the cloudiest stock in my walk-in, so the students would really see, wow, it started super cloudy and now it's super clear. And they would all say, ooh, ah, right? You guys get the idea. I'm trying to get a good camera angle on this. Oh, that's not good. That's not good. I'll just hold it. So you guys get the idea. When I fill that up with bones and matter, I will go ahead and throw those parts away. I usually let them sit for a minute, drain out, okay, and throw them away. Another thing that I will do is, now that I'm kind of getting low, I'm going to put the edge of my pot up against something. So now it's tilted. All the liquid goes down to one side, and I can start working on that side. And as you get down to the bottom, it gets cloudier and cloudier. So some chefs will actually not grab the last little bit in their stock pot to add to the main batch. They'll get the good stuff out, and then that last little bit, they'll use it to start another stock or make a soup out of or something. Now I'm tilting the pot, getting the rest. I guess I may as well just finish straining this, and then you'll see all the glorious, glorious stock that we have. Again, this was just kitchen soup or kitchen sink stock right here. Just everything I've been collecting for weeks. It's animal stock. I got about 3 or 4 different animals in here. I think I just saw a piece of bacon that I had, right? Just stuff I've collected. But I did throw in some of those aromatics, some of the thyme, some of the garlic, some of the mirepoix, the vegetables that we talked about, okay? So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. I strained that out. You get rid of this. You can kind of see the china cap there, the coarse one. And I'm just getting the last little bits of goodness out of there, and it's going in the pot. Whoa, buddy. And then there's stuff in the bottom of this china cap. I don't really want to shake it around. That's just going to be particles in my stock, so I just left that alone. And then here's my stock. I can see a little bit of fat on the surface, but the trick with that is I tend to leave my fat on the top there. I chill this, and then when I come back the next day, that fat is solidified on there, and I can just lift the fat off in one piece or in a lot of little pieces or whatever. But then I have a perfectly fat-free stock, which is a beautiful thing. Let's see. James is talking about how he hates the raft, the egg white raft, and that's a little part of the consomme, a little tip on what's coming up in one of these other classes coming up here. Okay, and so the egg white raft is what we use to clarify. Let me make sure that I've got some fire under my stock over here, and that other stock is just on the fire. Let's see, a couple of other things I want to talk about. You know, let's take another look at this. By the way, it's pretty darn clear, but it got a little cloudy in those last stages, and so we'll be able to make a nice consomme out of that. Now, some other things I want to talk about. You just saw a white stock method using bones, using mirepoix, using aromatics, and using water, right? 4 different things came together to make that. Now, if we're making a vegetable stock, super easy, leave out the bones, bump up the vegetables, and you can use a lot of different vegetables. For instance, we can use parsnip along in our mirepoix. That's a great one that a lot of people don't appreciate, in my opinion. We need to appreciate our parsnips. We also have things like leeks, other types of onions. You want to kind of ease up on red onions. Sometimes they can really darken your stock, blacken it. You can throw other herbs in there. One caution about herbs is we don't want to use the leaves. The leaves have the chlorophyll in them, and you'll come out with a dark or greenish looking stock. It's usually more dark than greenish, quite frankly. But the leaves, they're for finishes on plates and things like that. You eat the leaves, but herb stems, if you have cleaned the thyme off of a stem of plant, right, a herb plant, you clean the thyme off, you can throw those herbs in, the stems in there, and those stems have flavor to them. Clean off your basil stems, throw those in your vegetable stock, right? So bottom line, get all your vegetables into the pot, usually about 5 pounds of vegetables for 1 gallon of water. And then you bring it up to a boil, and I simmer that for maybe 5 minutes, and then I turn it off and let it steep like a cup of tea. And I get a really nice vegetable stock out of that. And so again, veggies in a pot, cover with cold water, bring it to a boil, simmer, reduce to a simmer for like 5 minutes, turn it off, let it steep for about 10 minutes, and you're done. Another little tip for that is cut your vegetables smaller. Since it's such a short cooking time, you need those smaller vegetables so you can really extract flavor out of them. That's your vegetable stock. When we talk about brown stocks, what we do is we will brown off our bones. We'll roast our bones off, and then we will brown off our vegetables for that. We throw that all in a pot, cover with cold water, bring it up to a boil, reduce to a simmer. We let that go 6 to 8 hours, skim the scum on the surface, get rid of the fat, all of that stuff, and then strain it out just like you saw tonight, right? Or drop the stock, right? And that's your brown stock. There's another step in there where we brown off tomato paste. You might add some tomato in there and brown that to give you extra color. But that's basically, we covered white stock, we talked about veg stock, and we just talked about brown stock as well, okay? So that's really what I wanted to cover tonight. I was just looking at my fire there. All I wanted to cover, don't forget your golden ratio. The golden ratio for stocks is 5 pounds of bones, 1 pound of vegetables, mirepoix specifically, and a gallon of water, right? For every gallon of water, you need 5 pounds of bones and a pound of veggies, okay? And that's kind of a good starting point. Don't go out there and measure it, you just get the feel for it. Get in the neighborhood and you'll be fine, okay? And don't ever add salt to this stuff, because you're going to use it for other things. Salt comes later in the process. Everybody get it? I think we got it. I think I kind of covered everything I wanted to talk about. This is, again, just stuff I covered in years and years of cooking out in kitchens and talking to students over the years, right? I had a couple thousand students go through my kitchens over the years, and this is the kind of stuff we talked about: career culinary skills, kitchen wisdom. There's no rocket science here. This is all the same stuff that your grandma was doing when she was cooking. I'm telling you, and there's nothing complex about this or mysterious or mystical. Okay, so keep at it, guys. I urge you to give this a try if you get a chance. Make a little stock, and next time we get together, we'll talk about consomme. We'll talk about taking a stock, fortifying it with flavor, and clarifying it. It's a beautiful thing, and it's quite fascinating. So keep an eye out for that one. In the meantime, you are on the Facebook Indy Cooks group. Hey, keep posting your adventures out there, your mistakes, your conquering events, okay? Anything and everything. Make it fun, and keep it light, okay? And also, if you'd like to watch some more of this culinary wisdom that I'm laying down, we have the Indy Cooks YouTube channel, where I've got over 150 culinary videos over there that just lay it all down too. These are a little shorter and a little more compounded, I guess is a good word, right? Or a bad word, I'm not sure. But it's not quite as in-depth as some of those other videos, which I'm covering a lot of stuff in those videos, but it's basically culinary school sitting over there for anybody who's interested. Okay, so check that out, and don't forget to subscribe your little brother, your mom, your grandma, whoever's into cooking. Please check that out and enjoy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're coming to an end here. I've covered stocks, I've covered drop-in stocks, and I've covered what we're getting into next. So I think without any further ado, I'll say the magic words, ladies and gentlemen. The party is always in the kitchen, and class is dismissed.